You may think you know Rick Harrison, the friendly, history-loving, confident, and always smiling man from Pawn Stars. But what the FBI found in his mansion is not only shocking, it could destroy the whole public image you once believed in Rick. This isn't a story about antiques or rare items. It's about a dark secret that Rick has kept hidden for years and that no one can ignore anymore. Are you ready to face the truth? If so, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. What's about to happen will change the way you see Rick Harrison, the man who made a fortune dealing antiques and coins, is now at the center of one of the scariest criminal investigations the world has ever seen. After years of running his pawn shop successfully, a business that made him famous, the FBI has stepped in and started a massive investigation into his shady activities. However, no one, not even the police, could have guessed what was hiding behind the gates of his huge mansion. What started as when FBI agents went into the mansion, they thought they would find some financial problems, shady contracts, or at the very least business fraud. But what they found was nothing like what they thought it would be. There are 25 bodies hidden everywhere, some in secret rooms, others buried in the yard, and more found in the dark corners of the huge estate. Rick Harrison, who used to amaze people with his knowledge and calm demeanor, is now linked to something terrifyingly dark. A serial killer. How did a man known for loving rare antiques get involved in such a horrible chain of events? To get to the bottom of the story, we need to look beyond what happened in the mansion and ask ourselves who Rick Harrison really is, and what is he hiding behind the persona that everyone has always thought of him as. To millions of viewers, Rick Harrison seems like the last person in the world who would be involved in such horrible crimes. He is the nice, knowledgeable pawn shop owner who not only makes Rick is the star of Pawn Stars, one of the most popular reality TV shows of all time, and each episode is about a different rare and valuable antique. Rick is not only an expert on history and antiques, but he is also a model millionaire businessman who has lived the American dream by turning his passion into a fortune. But what the cameras never show is the darkness that is quietly creeping behind the scenes. Rick's fame and success on Pawn Stars don't seem to be enough to satisfy him. People are talking about a different Rick Harrison than the one the public has ever seen. When federal investigators looked into his business, they found a truth more shocking than any rumor. A terrifying nightmare that no one had ever seen but was hidden in the mansion of the man the country once trusted. As the FBI looks deeper into Rick Harrison's private life, they find a pattern of oddities and more evidence that points to a dangerous person. The link between Harrison's well-known pawn shop and shady business dealings in the underground and Harrison's own increasingly erratic behavior. What was once a successful business model and an inspiring story of the American dream is now shown to be a carefully concealed cover for something much darker. What started as a financial investigation turns into a full-blown nightmare as FBI agents slowly realize that Harrison's activities are far more than just antiques or pawnbroking, as they once thought behind the polished facade. Rick used the store he was famous for to hide his criminal activity. Behind the scenes, the mansion, which had been a sign of success, was now the horrific scene of a series of shocking murders. The 25 bodies found were not victims of random violence. They were part of a cold plan, a pattern of death that had been cleverly hidden for years right in front of the public. The FBI didn't stop at looking at the books. They also looked at the people who worked there, followed every lead, and found clues linking Harrison to a series of unsolved disappearances. Each new piece of evidence revealed a darker side of Harrison. The man who was once praised as a brilliant businessman had built an empire on lies, manipulation, and maybe even murder. But the biggest question is, how could Rick Harrison, who has millions of fans, have kept such a dark secret hidden for so many years? How could he keep up the image of a kind, funny, smart man while living a sinful life? The answer lies in how complicated he was as a person and how big of an empire he built. As the investigation went on, it became clear that this wasn't just a crime. It was a social tragedy and a culture shock. The FBI findings quickly sent shock waves across the United States. Not only was the number of bodies shocking, but so was the fact that it had been kept secret for so long and so well. Rick Harrison had kept his horrifying secret from everyone, including family, friends, and even long-time associates didn't realize what a monster he had become as the investigation continued to reveal the truth. Rick Harrison's public image began to fall apart. He was no longer the beloved TV personality. He was now a cold-blooded killer and a predator hiding in plain sight. As each chilling detail of the investigation came to light, the horror of his crimes became clearer, adding another stab to the terrifying portrait of a man who was once seen as a role model, Rick Harrison. Rick, who became famous and rich on the TV show Pawn Stars, is now the subject of a shocking FBI investigation. The investigation not only finds evidence of a murder, but it also finds a darkness that has been building up for years in Rick's life, which seemed to be going perfectly. It turns out that Rick's reputation was built on a lie, a carefully constructed front to hide horrifying truths. As the investigation continues to uncover secrets, it becomes clear that this is not just the story of people around him while hiding his darkest secrets. When the shocking truth about Rick Harrison comes out, the whole country is shocked. How could a man with such a friendly, likable TV persona hide such a dark secret? That question still haunts millions of people. Rick's story shows that looks can be deceiving, and that sometimes the truth is scarier than anything we can imagine. Like many entrepreneurs he started, he wasn't always a household name. Rick was born in 1965 into a family that had nothing to do with antiques or collectibles. He spent his childhood in North Carolina before moving to Las Vegas, the city that would become the setting for the story that would change his life forever. Las Vegas, known for its bright lights, high stakes, and promise of instant riches, wasn't easy for a young man who didn't know anyone and didn't have any money. It was a place that could crush and kill those who weren't ready. Rick wasn't very strong, but he had something valuable: a good business sense and the ability to see value in things that others didn't. When Rick was a teenager, he started a pawn shop in downtown Las Vegas and sold anything he could to make money. It wasn't a fancy shop, but Rick had a big dream. He didn't want to run a normal pawn shop. He wanted to make something special that stood out from the others. Rick saw potential in old, forgotten historical artifacts. Rick quickly became known for his love of history and ability to figure out the value of things. The small shop started to get noticed, and people came to buy and sell things as well as hear him talk about and analyze unique items. Rick wasn't just a pawnbroker. He was a real expert whose opinions were respected and trusted. But it was his business sense that really shone through. He knew that pawn shops were more than just places to sell old things. Rick started buying a lot of different things, from rare art and historical documents to ancient coins and expensive collectibles. Over time, he became known as a treasure hunter with an unmatched attention to detail. Then, in 2009, Rick's life changed when TV producers approached him with an idea for a new reality show. They wanted to find a family, run pawn shop that could give viewers a fascinating look behind the scenes into the strange world of buying and selling. The idea behind Pawn Stars was simple but effective. Show everyday transactions with real experts like Rick as the stars who brought their knowledge and insight to each item. The show became a phenomenon, and Rick's pawn shop became more than just a household name. It became a global brand. But behind the fame and the bright lights, Rick Harrison hid a dark secret that no one could have imagined, and when those secrets came to light, the world was shocked to learn that sometimes the most well-known people are the most dangerous. Pawn Stars quickly became popular, going from a small reality show to a cultural phenomenon. Millions of people watched every week to see Rick Harrison, his father Richard Old Man Harrison, his son Corey Big Hose Harrison, and the strange but endearing Chumley deal in antiques and collectibles. What made the show unique wasn't just the things that were traded, but the people who did the deals. People loved Rick because he had a dry sense of humor, was calm, didn't take himself too seriously, and knew a lot about history. Rick wasn't just a businessman. He became a character that people looked forward to seeing every week. In the years that followed, Pawn Stars became one of the most popular reality shows of all time, making Rick Harrison a millionaire and putting the gold and silver pawn shop on the map. The show became a mainstay on the History Channel, and Rick's family business empire grew huge. Rick's success and fame opened doors he never thought possible, like major talk shows, interviews, and cameos in movies. But fame comes with a price. As Pawn Stars got bigger, so did the public's attention on Rick. He was no longer the owner of a small pawn shop in Las Vegas. He was now the face of a global brand. With that attention came the pressure to keep his business running smoothly, keep up his public image, and keep attracting viewers. In the unstable world of reality TV, Rick seemed to watchers were increasing, business was booming, and Rick's personal brand was growing. But behind the scenes, rumors started to spread that the man they saw on TV wasn't really the man running the pawn shop. Behind the door, rumors of shady dealings, internal discontent, and shady business practices began to surface. And while Rick continued to smile for the cameras, a darker truth was brewing that was more terrifying than anything ever seen on TV. Then it happened. As the Pawn Stars empire grew, a quiet but deadly chain of events began. There were no news stories or public outcries, just a quiet phone call to a government office with an anonymous tip. It was a warning that had been ignored for too long, but that seemingly unimportant call led to an FBI investigation that would reveal Rick Harrison's true life. The man who was once loved by millions of viewers was now at the center of a shocking investigation. When Rick's long, kept secrets came out, his image as a successful businessman and family man fell apart in a way that no one could have imagined. At first, the police didn't think he was a serial killer. They weren't even looking for criminals. The investigation started with a financial audit of the gold and silver pawn shop, the reality TV star Rick Harrison's pawn shop. This is when federal agents found problems with the books from missing money. Records of shady transactions and money that hadn't been seen. At first glance, it looked like a small financial fraud that could be solved with a few interviews and a lot of paperwork. But what they found was a much scarier nightmare. When agents from the FBI Organized Crime Division were brought in, they started to hear rumors about Harrison's ties to underground networks, ranging from illegal artifact trafficking to dealings with the world of organized crime. The pawn shop's strange success because Harrison was so well known on TV, investigators had a lot of questions. For example, why would a pawn shop have such rare and historically valuable items that were often stolen from museums? As the agents dug deeper, they realized they weren't just looking into a pawn shop. They were looking into a transnational crime network. People who regularly did business with Harrison were started to be tracked down. From there, the FBI found a network of people with ties to the international mafia, black market smugglers, and even archaeologists. The real surprise wasn't in the ledgers, but in Rick Harrison's mansion. After months of surveillance, the police decide to raid the fancy mansion outside of Las Vegas, which people used to think was a haven for the rich and reality TV stars' parties. What they find there goes against all crime theories. Rick's mansion isn't just a house, it's also a warehouse, a storage facility, a hideout, and, most horrifyingly, a mass grave. The raid leaves a horrible mark on FBI history. Agents didn't find what they thought they would. They are looking for illegal items and stolen papers, but what they find instead is proof of a series of planned murders. They can see into dark hallways that lead to an abandoned basement and find the first body, that of a man who is too badly damaged to be identified. There are more bodies to come, each hidden in a different room and long dead. There was no sign of randomness. Each body had been placed on purpose. Rick Harrison was no longer just a reality TV businessman. It was no longer a financial fraud. It was one of the darkest and most horrific cases in modern American history, and not even the most experienced agents could have seen it coming. As police searched the mansion, it was clear they weren't looking for stolen artifacts or signs of financial fraud. Instead, they were looking for illegal dealings, the smuggling of rare relics, and a series of serial murders that were all happening on the property that the public used to admire. Instead of looking into small problems, they were focusing on a much darker question: how many people had died there and why? The first alarm was set off when an unmarked box arrived at the mansion. The FBI had been quietly investigating Rick Harrison for months, gathering evidence of illegal dealings and links to criminal networks. While keeping an eye on his gold and silver pawn shop, agents noticed a pattern of high-value items coming in and out of the store all the time, most of them from unknown sources, but things weren't adding up. A really dark turn happened when they looked at the mansion itself. Harrison's mansion, which used to be a sign of wealth and success, was now a maze of mysteries. The huge estate with its acres of land and fancy rooms that seemed to be a facade was only a facade on the outside. Inside, there were rooms that no one had ever been in before, not even close family and friends. As the FBI went deeper into the mansion's lower floors, they entered a different world. They found damp, stale hallways that seemed stuck in time. Then they came across a locked door with paint peeling from lack of use. When the door was finally opened, a terrible smell filled the room: decay. In that dark room, they found the first body wrapped in a rag. The body was so decomposed that it was impossible to identify. Forensic experts said the person had probably been dead for months or even longer. The agent who found the body was horrified not only by the condition of the body, but also by how it had been stored. Not by accident, the bodies were left there as if waiting for someone to come looking for them. As they searched each room, they found a scarier truth. Instead of illegal goods, the FBI had found a nightmare, a series of gruesome murders. Some of the bodies were badly decomposed, but others were surprisingly well preserved. The murders seemed to have been going on for years in Harrison's own home, taking place in secret. The bodies were found in closets, wall niches, and under floors. As if they had been there, some of the bodies were hidden in places Harrison had been, like his office and personal library. It was clear that he had not only hidden the bodies, but also lived with them. One of the scariest things about the case is that the bodies weren't just thrown in random places. Each one seemed to have been placed on purpose, reflecting a sick logic in the killer's mind. The killer's careful planning, choice of hiding places, and complete silence inside the mansion raised the big question: was this all part of a plan? Harrison chose his victims, or did he just have an uncontrollable urge to kill? Forensic experts worked around the clock to figure out what killed the victims. Some had signs of being beaten, like bruises and knife wounds, while others had unknown chemicals on their bodies that showed they had been poisoned. This proved that these deaths were not random, but part of a planned series of murders. So far, 25 bodies have been found, and the number is still going up. Each body brings a scarier truth. As the investigation went on, it became clear that Rick Harrison had been living two lives. The dark side was an unexpected nightmare hidden in the mansion he lived in. Some of the victims had personal relationships with Harrison, while others were complete strangers, Some seem to have been singled out, while others just happened to be in the right place at the right time. The big question now is why this happened. Was it because of the underground world Harrison was involved in, or was it a sick personal truth that was being hidden? When called home, the FBI quickly realizes that they are dealing with a case that is much more complicated than a simple murder. They are not only dealing with a serial killer hiding in the shadows, but also with a man living a double life and skillfully hiding his darkest secrets from the public. Rick Harrison, who built an empire from a small pawn shop and a successful TV career, is now the main suspect in one of the most shocking crimes the world has ever seen. As the investigation grows, the world starts to see a different Rick. Harrison, who has a nice public image, but has been hiding dark secrets in his mansion for months. The FBI searches Harrison's belongings and finds the bodies of 25 people who were murdered hidden in strange places. Now that police have found physical evidence of the murders, they have to ask why and how did Rick Harrison do such horrible things from the start. All signs point to Harrison being more than a passive bystander. The bodies were hidden with the precision and care of a skilled killer who knew what he was doing. Harrison, who was known for his skill at appreciating antiques, planned every move he made to hide the crime. Each body was placed in a different part of the mansion, so that it would not be found for as long as possible. The investigation starts by putting together a timeline of the murders, including when they started, how many people were killed, and how a successful man like Harrison got involved in this cycle of horror. As the FBI looked into it, it became clear that Harrison had a link to the murders weren't just random or motivated by opportunism. They seemed to have been carefully planned, cold, and deliberate. Harrison's secret life led them to a huge web of criminal activities that went far beyond the pawn shop, which was seen as just a front for a secret network. The FBI found that Harrison was involved in smuggling drugs, laundering money, and having ties to organized crime groups around the world. What they found didn't match the public image of Harrison as a friendly dealmaker. Harrison operated in the investigation also showed that he was involved in a lot of high-value deals, some involving stolen artifacts and others the sale of illegal and rare items. The pawn shop was both a real business and a great place to hide money laundering and illegal deals. One of the most important pieces of evidence against Harrison was a set of encrypted messages that were found on his personal device. These messages were sent and received by people connected with organized crime, showing that the information showed that Harrison not only traded illegally, but also planned and ordered several murders. Each victim seemed to have been targeted for a specific reason, though this wasn't always clear. The FBI also found that Harrison's pawn shop had been a meeting place for people with ties to the black market, not just regular people looking for antiques. These men used Harrison's shop as a safe haven for when they were dealing with the law. Harrison believed that he had the connections and resources to protect them. So many of the victims found in the mansion were actually connected to these criminal networks. Some were partners in the deals, while others were caught up in Harrison's cycle of violence and corruption. As more information came out, it became clear that the victims were not chosen at random. They were killed because they were seen as betraying Harrison in business or being a liability in his criminal activities. Some were threatened and blackmailed before they were killed. Others were killed to protect Harrison's empire. The goal wasn't just to make money. It was to control and get rid of anyone who dared to challenge his power. It became clear very quickly that Harrison wasn't just a con artist or smuggler. He was a cold-blooded manipulator willing to kill to keep up his image and power. The murders were planned with great accuracy. There were no signs of panic or haste, only cold-blooded calculation. What's scariest was that not all of them were done for money or to protect trade secrets. As the FBI looked into them, discovered hidden rooms in the mansion that showed the real reasons behind the murders were much more complicated and evil than first thought. This part of the mystery may have never been seen by the public. Harrison kept a strange dossier with detailed notes, photos, and even the personal belongings of his victims. The documents paint a terrifying picture of a man who lived in a world where a person's worth was based on how well they served his goals. Harrison seemed to keep a warped scoreboard where he recorded the psychological profiles gathered during the investigation, painted a scary picture of a man who skillfully hid his darkest tendencies behind a perfectly constructed public facade. He built his reputation on a friendly, approachable facade as a knowledgeable, trustworthy antiques expert. But behind that polished facade was a man who had no problem killing anyone who threatened the empire he had built, whether it was through manipulation or violence. As the police dug deeper into the case, they found that Rick Harrison was not only responsible for a series of murders, but also the mastermind and ringleader of a criminal network run by wit, charm, and money. He surrounded himself with criminals who were either too afraid to speak out or didn't want to. Harrison carefully kept the terrible truth hidden behind the walls of his fortified mansion and the public image he had built up over years of TV appearances. As the FBI looked into Harrison's case, it became clear that he was not a small or casual part of the plot. He was the mastermind of a bloody empire. When the public first heard that Rick Harrison, the famous porn star, was being investigated, they were shocked. No one could have imagined what was hiding behind Harrison's image as a successful businessman. For years, Harrison was seen as the personification of the American dream, someone who built an empire from nothing and won people over with his charisma. When the FBI raided his mansion and found the bodies of 25 people, everything fell apart. People no longer saw Rick Harrison in the same light. A man who was once admired across the country was now the focus of one of the scariest criminal investigations in recent memory. At first, many people didn't believe the accusations because they remembered Harrison as passionate about history, honest in business, and always trustworthy on screen. They wanted to think it was a mistake or a smear campaign. As more proof came in, it was clear that Harrison's involvement wasn't a surprise but the result of years of control, manipulation, and deliberate murder. The victims weren't random. They were part of a complex plan that Harrison saw as threats and needed to be killed. Harrison's calm, control of information, and perfect public image kept him hidden for years. But when the truth came out, the price was inevitable. The show Pawn Stars, which had made Harrison famous, crashed. Network executives could no longer support a show based on an icon accused of murder. Episodes that had once been light entertainment were now signs of deception and betrayal, and fans felt deeply betrayed. Harrison was more than just a TV star. He had been the face of truth, knowledge, and justice, and now he was a nightmare that had been hidden for too long. But it wasn't just the TV show that was canceled because of the scandal. Harrison Gold and Silver Pawn Shop's business had also seen a big drop in both traffic and sales. The store, which used to be packed with eager customers and have long lines, was now a shadow of what it used to be. People who had trusted Harrison with their valuables no longer felt safe even entering the store. The store's once reputable reputation was ruined by Harrison's criminal past and the way he had built his entire empire. Harrison's success had been built on his image as a trusted expert. Trust quickly broke down, and the empire quickly went into crisis. Harrison was no longer the outgoing, friendly boss on TV. He was now a social outcast and a notorious figure linked to crime, deception, and murder. His reputation, which had been built up over years of hard work and charm, was in tatters. He had gone from being a respected businessman to a criminal, and the fall would cost him for the rest of his life in the days and weeks to come. After the bodies were found, Harrison's personal life started to fall apart. Friends, co-workers, and even family members who had been there for him turned against him. People who had worked closely with him started to speak out, some shocked, some angry, some saying they had never seen Harrison's bad side, while others admitted they had always felt uncomfortable around him. The man who had built an empire with charm and a sharp business mind was now seen as a predator who had used his power, and the scandal has had a huge impact on his life, and it has also affected the Harrison family. The family that used to be the foundation of Pawn Stars is now caught in the crossfire. His son, Corey Big Hose Harrison, is in the spotlight because of his ties to his father's crimes. There is no proof that Corey was involved in the murders, but the public is closely watching him. The once close-knit family is now at risk of breaking up because of Rick Harrison's actions. Harrison's fall has been nothing short of catastrophic. The money that used to be a sign of success is now a hollow shell, and his career, which many people admired, is now linked to a string of brutal murders. No amount of success or money can wash away the stain he left behind. Harrison is now just a man stuck in his own bad decisions. He built his life on lies and manipulation, and now that his lies and manipulation are being exposed, chilling new details keep coming out that are scarier than the bodies, criminal connections, and hidden rooms in his mansion are just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to what the FBI finds. What they find will forever change how the world sees the man who used to be a famous TV star. As they dig deeper, they find not only a pawn shop, but also an empire built on lies, crime, and blood. FBI forensic experts worked hard to identify the victims. Some were quickly identified while others remained a mystery. However, a pattern began to emerge. Many of the victims had done business with the man. Some people who worked with Harrison were involved in his illegal activities, while others just knew too much. The pawn shop, which was supposed to be a place to buy and sell antiques, was actually a front for money laundering, drug dealing, and the black market. One of the most shocking revelations was coded messages between Harrison and important figures in the underworld. These messages showed that he wasn't just a go-between. He actively directed and planned the deaths of people who threatened his secrets. Harrison was exposed as a master criminal. He used charm and influence to get people to do what he wanted, hiding his true nature behind the image of a trustworthy businessman. The FBI also found personal photos and diaries that showed him watching, controlling, and slowly killing the people around him. In the photos, Harrison is often seen smiling with his victims, which is a horrifying contrast to the brutality he did in the shadows. The diary entries show his descent into darkness and his twisted belief that he was unbeatable and that no one could stop him from being successful. His cruel behavior towards others, using them as tools and throwing them away when he wasn't needed, reached a breaking point when the FBI found that his collection of valuable antiques wasn't just a hobby, but also proof of a web of organized crime. Rick Harrison, who used to be a beloved TV star, became the center of one of the biggest scandals in American entertainment history when the FBI found that some of the items in his pawn shop were bought illegally and stolen. From private collections to museums and even the estates of dead people, Harrison seemed to have used the pawn shop to hide his illegal treasures while passing them off as legal purchases. But the real horror started when investigators found his secret collection. Among the valuables were personal items like photos, jewelry, and clothing that Harrison had taken from the people he had killed. It was as if Harrison was collecting the remains of their lives to keep as memories. The scariest part of the investigation was the discovery of there was a secret room in Harrison's mansion that no one knew about, not even those closest to him. It was full of strange things, like old, broken-down items mixed in with the victim's personal belongings. Harrison seemed to have carefully recorded each murder, keeping mementos from each victim as warped trophies. The room was a shrine to his crimes, a place where he could think about the lives he had taken and the bloody empire he had built. As the FBI put together the evidence, it became clear that Harrison had lived two lives, On the one hand, Harrison was a famous pawnbroker and reality TV star. On the other, he was the brains behind a complex criminal network. His empire was built on exploitation, manipulation, and eventually murder. Harrison used his charm, good looks, and business sense to hide who he really was. But behind the walls of his fancy mansion was a man who was willing to kill to protect his power and his secrets. An FBI investigation shows that Harrison has been lying to people for years. Using his power and influence to avoid Rick Harrison is a terrifyingly smart man who managed to keep up the appearance of a kind and understanding man while running a criminal empire. But the truth will eventually come out, and no amount of cover-up can hide the fact that he is a cold-blooded killer who built his empire on lies and death. As soon as Rick Harrison's name is linked to the shocking discoveries at the mansion, the investigation that had been going on quietly becomes a worldwide sensation. The man who once charmed millions of people around the world knew Harrison for his sense of humor and deep knowledge of ancient artifacts. He is now the central figure in one of the most shocking cases of our time. Harrison's arrest caused a media circus, and the murders shocked the world before the details were known. Reporters and photographers from major TV networks flocked to Las Vegas to cover the scandal, camped out around the mansion that had once been a symbol of Harrison's success. New information added to the excitement. There were dead bodies, years of complex criminal activity, and a secret room full of evidence that could be used against the suspect. The story was so dark and shocking that people couldn't take their eyes off of it for weeks. The name Rick Harrison was talked about on newscasts, late-night talk shows, social media, and in person. Networks rushed to cover it, and investigative reporters worked day and night. Criminal psychologists, psychiatrists, and lawyers spoke out about details like finding 25 bodies hidden in different parts of the mansion. This caused a huge wave of anger and horror, and each new discovery added another piece to the horror puzzle. TV shows were made to break down Harrison's cover story, and tabloids used every chance to look into every part of his life. Pictures from the Pawn Stars set were used on newspaper covers with shocking headlines calling him a cruel killer. As more information came out, the craze only got worse. Some news outlets even compared the story to a real-life crime drama. It was hard to believe that a beloved TV character could be hiding such a horrible secret. Social media was a big part of getting the word out. The hashtag #RickHarrison trended for weeks, and people flooded Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook to express their shock, anger, and disappointment. Some couldn't believe that the man they used to love on TV could have people felt betrayed because they couldn't connect the funny, smart Rick Harrison with the cold-blooded monster he was now being shown to be as memes, viral posts, and heated debates erupted. This wasn't just a criminal case. It was a global phenomenon, and everyone was watching, unable to take their eyes off the drama that was unfolding day by day. People were shocked when a man who was once seen as a success story on reality TV, like Rick Harrison, was sent to prison for being a cold-blooded killer. People were wondering what went wrong and how a man who built an empire from a pawn shop could be involved in such horrible crimes. The bigger question was, did those closest to him, like his wife, children, and coworkers, know anything? An FBI investigation showed that Rick's family, especially his son Corey Big Hose Harrison, lived and worked with him for many years. This made people wonder if Corey knew what his father was doing or if he was just being manipulated. People were eager to hear what Corey knew or didn't know about his father's double life. When he went on TV, Corey was shocked, angry, and frustrated. He insisted that he had never suspected his father and that the accusations had devastated him. Corey offered his condolences to the families of the victims and talked about feeling betrayed by the father he trusted the most. But the public's sympathy didn't last long as the media continued to swarm him. Some people started to wonder if Corey really didn't know what was going on or if he had just chosen to ignore the signs. Rick Harrison had always been the most important person in the family, acting as the father, boss, and role model. Because of this, it was hard to believe that Corey and the rest of his family didn't know about his father's dark secrets. As the trial got closer, the pressure on the Harrison family grew. The media camped outside their house, watching their every move, looking for a frown or a whisper that might shed some light on the case. When Rick's wife and son were seen in public, they were questioned a lot. Some people felt sorry for them, saying they were victims of lies, while others criticized them for being too trusting or even blind. The truth was that they lived so close to Rick and worked with him every day that it was hard to believe they hadn't seen any suspicious signs. At the same time, the Pawn Star series, which used to be loved by millions of people, was in shambles. Fans felt betrayed. How could they continue to watch a show run by a murderer? Many took to social media to voice their anger. Many viewers said they would never watch the show again, and others just couldn't support something that was now associated with crime and violence. As a result of the backlash, the producers had to make the difficult decision to cancel Pawn Stars. This was the end of a reality TV empire and the final blow to Rick Harrison's downfall, but it was only the beginning. All eyes were now on Rick Harrison's trial, where he had to decide whether to testify, admit guilt, or keep fighting back. There were still no answers, but everyone was waiting. With dozens of bodies found in the mansion, forensic analysis, and Harrison's ties to an international crime network, the prosecution seemed to have a strong case. Harrison's defense team, which included some of the biggest names in the business, was not going to give up, though. They questioned the validity of the investigation and tried to hide evidence by saying that the FBI had exceeded its authority, but the judge ruled in favor of the prosecution. Letting all the evidence be shown was bad for Harrison's defense. The trial began in a room full of reporters, witnesses, and legal experts. The media kept covering every move, but this wasn't a sensational story anymore. It was a life-or-death battle for Rick Harrison. The prosecution presented strong evidence, including DNA on the bodies, coded messages about the murders, and testimony from people who had worked with him in his criminal activities. Harrison was portrayed as a friendly, well-known man on TV. His TV days were over, and he was now a cold, calculating man who would do anything to protect the empire he built, even the lives of those around him. As more shocking details came out of the courtroom, one thing was clear: the world would never look at Rick Harrison the same way again. And the haunting question remained: what happens next? The defense team painted a picture of a man who was caught up in a web of crime, but who the defense team said that Harrison never directly ordered anyone to be killed, and that the bodies found in his mansion could have been the result of random violence or the work of a third party who wanted to frame him for a terrible crime. One of their main strategies was to attack the credibility of the witnesses, saying that many of those who testified against Harrison had personal reasons to lie or had been forced to do so by police. At the same time, they tried to weaken the weight of the forensic evidence, suggesting that the analysis might have been flawed or that the bodies were not necessarily directly linked to Harrison, as the prosecution said. The trial was tense at times. Harrison seemed calm and in control at times, but his anxiety was palpable at others. The pressure of the courtroom seemed to have worn him down and replaced his initial confidence with fatigue and skepticism. Harrison's lawyers tried many times to have the charges dropped or reduced, but each time they were met with strong opposition. The prosecution made a strong case against Harrison, and more evidence pointed the finger at him. Harrison himself was called to the stand, which was a risky move, but also the defense's last chance. He looked tired but tried to stay calm as he spoke, and he admitted to running a pawn shop and doing some shady business, but he denied any involvement in the murders. He said he was set up by people who wanted to ruin his career and reputation, but that the prosecution wasn't going to let it go. They quickly responded with a barrage of questions that pointed out problems with Harrison's testimony and presented evidence that directly linked him to the murders. Harrison was under constant pressure, and by the end of the questioning, his cool started to break. The tone in the courtroom was clear. the jury was becoming less and less likely to believe what he said. Harrison's personal credibility had been severely damaged. As the trial came to a close, the jury faced there was a lot of evidence against Harrison, but his defense team worked hard to cast doubt on its reliability and motive. The jury had to decide whether to believe Harrison was a cold-blooded criminal mastermind willing to kill to protect his criminal empire, or whether to believe the story that he was just a victim who had been used and framed. The outcome of this decision would not only affect Harrison's fate, but it could also set a precedent for the whole criminal justice system. The jury came to a decision. As the judge read the verdict, the courtroom was tense. Harrison sat there still, holding his breath, waiting for his fate to be decided. The prosecution was worried, and the defense could only hope for a miracle. When the verdict was read, it sent shock waves through the courtroom, the media, and people all over the world. A new chapter in the troubled life of Rick Harrison ended. He was once praised by millions, but now he has to face the consequences of the darkness he had embraced. When Rick Harrison walked into the courtroom after weeks of drama, no one could have seen this coming. Harrison, who was once praised as a model businessman, a loving father, and the star of the hit reality show Pawn Stars, was now at the center of an unimaginable tragedy. After weeks of tense proceedings, the verdict was in. Harrison was found guilty of conspiracy to commit murder and running a criminal organization. The jury deliberated for hours, but the bodies found the testimony of once honest witnesses to the complex web of crime pointed in one direction. Harrison had planned the murders and used the Pawn Stars' spotlight to hide a horrifying secret. At that moment, Harrison's family sat in stunned silence. His son, Corey Big Hose Harrison, has always maintained his father's innocence and is shocked to learn that his father has been found guilty of murder. The sentence is life in prison without the chance of parole. The judge is very angry about Harrison's crimes and how they hurt the families of the victims. Harrison, who used to be free to walk around in the spotlight, is now led away in handcuffs like a notorious criminal. No more TV deals, no more fame. Everything Harrison built his career, reputation, and legacy on is now in ruins. The cameras that used to follow him turn away, the lights go out, and Harrison walks into a prison van, leaving behind a crumbling dynasty. But the effects of the trial didn't stop there. The famous Pawn Stars show was officially canceled. Fans who used to love the show couldn't believe that its friendly, trustworthy face was actually a cold-blooded killer. Corey Chumley and the rest of the cast were caught in a media storm and had to decide whether to keep working without Harrison or end it all. In the end, the network chose to cancel the show to avoid being linked to the worst scandal in the show's history, even though they weren't directly involved. Their futures now hang in the balance. Some tried to protect their family's honor, while others chose to stay silent. For Corey, being the son of a convicted murderer put him under unimaginable pressure to constantly appear in the media to explain, defend, and sometimes endure heavy criticism from the public. For Harrison's wife, the shock was a deep wound. She had built an empire with her husband and now had to face the horrifying reality of who he really was and the consequences of a marriage gone wrong, even though she chose to stay silent in the media. The media was always watching her and asking her a lot of heartbreaking questions. The families of the victims who lost loved ones must now start a long and painful process of healing. The brutal details of their deaths were laid bare in court, leaving wounds that will never heal. The guilty verdict brought some justice, but it did not bring their loved ones back. The media continued to follow them around as they tried to rebuild their lives forever. Pawn Stars, once a symbol of American success and entrepreneurship, is now a memory haunted by crime, betrayal, and pain. And while the verdict has been delivered, the journey for those left behind from the Harrison family to the family members of the victims has only just begun. What do you think of Rick Harrison's unimaginable fall? Leave a comment below And if you want to keep up with the shocking stories behind the spotlight, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. We'll be back with more facts that will make you think.